Welcome to round number 2 of our Winter Invitational. We have Jacob on player 1 side piloting Boros Initiative, and we have Jesse piloting Temur Delver in this event on player 2 side. I apologize for the format that is being displayed right now. I had some technical difficulties with the overhead camera, so we're just going to have the hand cam perspectives until we get that back. So Jacob is on a mulligan down to 5, I believe, and Jesse on a mulligan to 6. Looks like she's keeping Wasteland, Tropical Island, Lightning Bolt, Dragon's Rage Channeler, Brainstorm, and Delver. Jacob considering his 5, and I didn't get a glimpse of the other card that he's pitching, but he's looking to pitch a second Archon of Emeria. He has one already in the hand, and he's looking to bottom 4th Aerlingus and the Archon of Emeria. So this will leave him with Archon. Oh, okay. So I think that was his. Is he on a mulligan to 4? I thought that was his mulligan to 5, but I could be wrong. Alright, so Jacob's looking at Ancient Tomb, 4th Aerlingus, Caracas, Ancient Tomb, Cavern of Souls, Solitude, and a Chrome Mox. Looks like he's bottoming the Chrome Mox and an Ancient Tomb. And the Cavern of Souls. Alright, Jesse's starting the game off with a Tropical Island into Delver. Gonna pass to Jacob. Jacob gonna draw a 4th Aerlingus. So leaves him with 2 4th Aerlingus, Ancient Tomb, Caracas, Solitude. Here's a Caracas for the turn. So if you can find a source of red mana here, this 4th Aerlingus actually wouldn't be too bad. But he's just gonna fire off a Solitude to get rid of Jesse's Delver while it's a 1-1. Alright, so Jesse going to be at 21. Going to play a Wasteland for her turn. Going to get rid of the Caracas. Pass to Jacob. Jacob going to draw a Chrome Mox for his turn. Not much going on, but that tends to happen when you're on a mulligan 4. Just going to pass to Jesse. Jesse draws a second Brainstorm for the turn. Casts a Brainstorm. Draws Murktide, Daze, and Ponder. So not finding another land drop here. Gonna put back the 2 red spells, which is Dragon's Rage Channeler and a Lightning Bolt. So kind of Brainstorm locked here, but next turn she can cast the Ponder to kind of shuffle away one of the red cards. Jacob going to draw a Lotus Petal for his turn. So finds the red source of mana, but doesn't have the Caracas in play anymore because of Jesse's Wasteland. But here's the Ponder from Jesse. Gonna see Dragon's Rage Channeler, Questing Beast, and Delver. Immediately gonna shuffle. Really looking for a second land here. Alright, she's going to draw off the Ponder. Finds another Ponder, not a land. Pass to Jacob. Jacob gonna draw an Archon of Emeria for his turn. Down comes Ancient Tomb. Might see Lotus Petal into Archon. Nope, going to be a Chrome Mox, most likely exiling 4th Aerlingus if it resolves. Yep. Down comes the Lotus Petal as well. And going to cast this Archon of Emeria using the Chrome Mox and the Ancient Tomb. So this brings Jacob down to 18. Jesse at 21. Archon is going to resolve. Jesse going to draw for her turn. Finds a Mishra's Bauble, still not finding another land. Jacob has no cards in hand and an Archon of Emeria in play. Jesse, for the 1 spell for the turn, is going to cast a Ponder, going to find Flooded Strand, Brazen Borrower, Lightning Bolt. So Jesse already has a Lightning Bolt in hand if she really wants to deal with this Archon of Emeria. She's going to stack it, Flooded Strand, Bolt, Brazen Borrower, going to draw the Flooded Strand. Play the Flooded Strand. It enters the battlefield tapped because of Archon of Emeria. So this is going to be a little rough because the next, even when Jesse fetches, the land is going to enter tapped. Jacob going to attack with the Archon of Emeria, drops Jesse down to 19. And just Jacob gonna pass a turn after that. Jesse gonna untap. Draws the second lightning bolt. Still locked into playing one spell per turn. Going to cast the Mishra's Bauble. She is gonna Mishra's Bauble target Jacob. And we do have the overhead camera stored. Alright, Jacob going to draw for his turn. Going to go straight into combat, attack Jesse down to 17 with the Archon of Emeria. Down comes Lotus Petal for his spell for the turn, and just passes back to Jesse. Jesse going to cast a Brainstorm here, and then try to crack the Flooded Strand, I assume is the play. She draws Questing Druid, Ponder, and I think that last card was a Daze. So yeah, she has tons of cards in hand, but not a ton of room to play these spells. So I believe the Questing Druid is going to the top. Not sure what the other card is, but they're most likely going to get shuffled here because Jesse does need that second source of mana. She is going to shuffle them away. She's going to shuffle them away, finds a volcanic island. Does come into play tapped, like we said earlier, because of the Archon of Emeria. Gonna untap. And what does she find for her turn? Looks like it was a Force of Will. So I think we're going to see a Murktide Regent here. Yes, down it comes. It is going to be a 6/6, I believe. Looks like there's Brainstorm, Ponder, Ponder. Okay, so it's a 7/7. So there's double Brainstorm, double Ponders exiled from it. Jacob's going to draw for his turn. Going to see there's a Fable of the Mirror Breaker and a Caves of Chaos Adventurer. So it is going to be hard for Jacob to resolve these spells, but I think he has to push them through. Like, he just has to run Jesse out of interaction. The problem is, even if he can get the counter spells out of Jesse's hand, her lightning bolts are very well suited against the threats that he's putting out. So if he does land the Fable, the Goblin token can be lightning bolted. Like, everything can be lightning bolted. The Goblin token, the Archon of Emeria, the Caves of Chaos Adventure, and then even the Reflection of Kiki Jiki that the Fable flips into is a 2/2. So that can be bolted as well. Alright, tapping for 1, 2, 3 mana. Down comes Fable of the Mirror Breaker using the Ancient Tomb. Brings Jacob down to 16, tying it up to Jesse 16. This is going to instill a reaction out of Jesse. Jesse going to Force of Will, exiling a Daze, drops herself down to 15. So neither player can cast a spell this turn. Archon can't attack through this Murktide Regent, so Jacob just going to pass the turn. Jesse going to draw for her turn. Going to tap 1 red mana, bolt the Archon of Emeria. This frees up a second spell. Down comes Ponder for Jesse. Jesse going to look at the top 3. And immediately just going to shuffle. So this Murktide Regent probably going to swing in for 7 now. Draws a Flooded Strand off of the Ponder. Down it comes for the land for the turn. Going to swing in with the Murktide. Drop Jacob down to 9 points of life. Looks like Jacob drew the Cavern of Souls. So he can force through this Caves of Chaos Adventure, introduce initiative, but he's just going to scoop it up. That will give Jesse game number 1 in round number 2. At the Winter Invitational. So we're going to take a quick look at sideboarding here. Jacob cutting... Oh, sorry. We'll take a look at Jesse just because she's a little bit more streamlined. Double Meltdown, double Hydro Blast going to come in. Jacob looks like... He looks like he's cutting a bunch of 4th Air Linguses. So Lotus Petal and a bunch of 4th Air Lingus. And in comes 4 Swords to Plowshares. Jesse going to be cutting Questing Druid. Questing Druid. I have a feeling she's going to be cutting all of her Questing Druids. So bringing in 4 cards, needs to cut 4. Debating on 2 of them already. I would imagine that Questing Druid isn't that bad in this matchup, especially if Jacob's going to be relying on Chalice of the Void. The Impulse Draw effect, so the quest side of the Questing Druid, it is 2 mana. It does help her dig for her sideboard cards like Meltdown. And it's also a threat that's not 1 mana. And even if you have, like, if you're able to get it onto the board, then the only real answer to it is Solitude, because if you're fighting under a Chalice of the Void, you can still cast all of your 1 mana spells into it to make it grow, but Jacob can't cast his Swords to Plowshares to get rid of it. So really the only hard answer, like, it is a very slow threat, but again, when you want, like, when you have a Chalice, when you're fighting against a Chalice, and like, it's hard to say because I don't know what you would cut for to keep the Druids in. Like, all of your other threats are just better. Like, Dragon's Rage Channeler also digs through your deck much harder than the Questing Druid does, and Delver can simply pitch to Force of Wills. But both players finish sideboarding, shuffling up, looking at their openers, and decide to mulligan. So both of them are going down to 6. Alrighty, so Jacob going to be on the play, going to look at his hand. Doesn't look, it's not great, but it's also not amazing. There's an Ancient Tomb in there for a land, and he has double Simian Spirit Guide, Lotus Petal for mana acceleration. Then his threats are double Seasoned Adventure and an Archon of Emeria. So he can push out a turn 1 Seasoned Dungeoneer, but it's very risky. Jessie on her side is looking at Dragon's Reach Channeler, Delver as threats, Lightning Bolt as disruption, still also has a Daze and a Hydroblast, and then a Brainstorm to round it off with 1 land in hand. Looks like Jacob is going to keep his hand. Looks like he's debating on throwing away a Simian Spirit Guide. Jessie still contemplating her hand. Jacob switching his mind, going to get rid of a Seasoned Dungeoneer instead. Jessie going to push away the Brainstorm. So going to keep all of her disruption. Down comes Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, Simian Spirit Guide, going to crack the Lotus Petal. Here is Seasoned Dungeoneer on turn number 1. Jessie's going to let it resolve, and in comes Initiative in the Undercity. So Jacob's mana is actually not terrible anymore because of this initiative. Going to find a basic Plains out of the hand, pass to Jessie. Jessie going to draw for her turn. Finds a Volcanic Island off of the top. So doesn't have to fight underneath a Chalice, so not too bad of a situation here. Going to see more of a traditional fight that we used to see when the Adventure, White Plume Adventure, was back in play. Hopefully Jessie can flip this Delver pretty quickly so she can start to try to grab initiative back from Jacob. But in comes Seasoned Dungeoneer, finds an Ancient Tomb, gets it added to his hand. Going to take Jessie down to 15. Jacob at 18. Going to be basic plane into Archon of Emeria? Yes, it is. Going to drop himself down to 16. Not looking good for Jessie here. This adventure is going to be very problematic. Looks like, oh, just going to daze the Archon of Emeria, but Jacob going to exile Simian Spirit Guide to pay for the additional 1. All right, going to pass the turn, going to take a peek, reveals Force of Will, flips the Delver of Secrets into Insectile Aberration. So this Volcanic Island and Force of Will are both in Jessie's hand. Jessie going to play the Volcanic Island, tap it for mana. Oh, no, sorry, it does not tap for mana. Enters the battlefield tapped because of the Archon of Emeria. So this is a very bad position for Jessie. Like, it's so hard for her to deal with this Seasoned Dungeoneer, especially now that it's been forged and has 2+1/+1 counters on it. And with the potential of Explore, I think is the mechanic. Yeah, whenever it explores, it has the potential to add an additional counter onto it. But Jacob going to trigger the initiative during his upkeep, going to go to the trap room, target Jesse. Jesse goes down from 15 to 10, losing 5 points of life from the Undercity trigger. Going to go straight into combat, attack with the Seasoned Engineer, going to explore, reveals Swords to Plowshare, gets a +1/+1 counter, making the Seasoned Engineer a 6/7. Jacob going to leave the Swords to Plowshare on the top. Jesse just takes 6 points of damage, goes down to 4. Jacob goes to his main phase 2, and just going to pass the turn. Jesse going to untap. I don't know what she could possibly draw to get herself out of this situation. Any land that she plays will come in tapped, which that was pretty detrimental. Like, the only case would probably be like a Brazen Borrower to bounce back the Seasoned Engineer, but even that is not a great play. And yeah, Jesse just going to scoop it up. So that makes it Jacob taking game number 2, tying it up 1-1 here in round number 2 of the Legacy of the North Winter Invitational. Okie dokie, here is game number 3 for round number 2. All right, we are going to see their opening hands. Jesse will be on the play here. She did win game number 1. Jacob tying it up in game number 2. So Jesse will now be on the play. Looks like both players are pretty land light, but Jacob does have Cavern of Souls, Lotus Petal, Chrome Mox, with a bunch of threats: Seasoned Engineer, Archon, Fable, and Caves of Chaos Adventure. Not good enough for him to keep. Jesse looking at a 1-lander, but decides that it is good enough to keep. But Jacob going to be looking at his 6 now. All right, there's Archon of Emeria, Seasoned Engineer, Chalice, Simeon Spirit Guide, Double Ancient Tomb, and a Plateau for Jacob. So it looks like it's good enough to keep. So the last 2 cards in Jesse's hand that I couldn't identify were... But going to start off with Volcanic Island into Dragon's Rage Channeler. Going to get a 1-drop into play before a Chalice comes down. There it is. There's going to be a Daze for the Chalice, going to return the Volcanic Island, but Jacob going to exile Simeon Spirit Guide to pay for the 1. But I think Jesse still gets to Surveil here. Looks like she is going to keep it on top. Daze does not resolve, or Daze resolves, but does not successfully counter the Chalice of the Void. Jesse going to chip in for 1 point of damage and pass the turn after applying the Volcanic Island. Jacob going to follow up with a Plateau into Archon of Emeria, drops himself down to 15. Jesse going to try to daze the Archon of Emeria. It is going to resolve and counter the Archon. Going to Surveil for Jesse, going to keep it on the top. And going to draw and play a Volcanic Island and then chip in for 1 point of damage again. Jacob draws for his turn. There's a Solitude. I think there's a 2nd Chalice in his hand and a 4th Aerlingus as well. Going to pay 2. Going to cast a 2nd Chalice of the Void on 1. Brings himself down to 12. Jesse going to cast a Brainstorm in response to the Chalice. There's 2 triggers happening here, so Surveil is going to go on the stack, and Jacob will counter it with the Chalice of the Void already on the battlefield. Jesse going to dump a 2nd Brainstorm into the graveyard and just pass. Oh no, that was on Jacob's turn. My mistake. A lot going on here. All right, so Bauble off the top, going to cast it, finds a Lightning Bolt on the top from Dragon's Rage Channeler's Surveil. Going to go straight into the graveyard. Jesse going to activate the Bauble, target Jacob. Jacob going to reveal Swords to Plowshares. Not going to be doing anything under this double Chalice. Jesse in hand has Meltdown, Delver, Murktide, and is it a Brazen Borrower? She's gonna draw during the upkeep. Finds an Unholy Heat. Jacob gonna draw for his turn. I think he found his Seasoned Engineer. Oh no, sorry, he found the Swords to Plowshare. Just gonna pass a turn, Jesse gonna draw. Finds a second Mishra's Bauble, gonna trigger Surveil. And pitches the Meltdown. So she's looking for the second source of mana. She is going to Bauble, reveals a Plains off of Jacob's library. Alright, tapping for 1 mana. Here is a Delver of Secrets. Gonna get countered by the Chalice. Gonna go to combat. Attack with the Dragon's Rage Chandler. Jacob going to Solitude. Exile the DRC. Bring Jesse up to 21. Sorry, 23. Because the Delver did make the DRC delirious. Alright, Jacob going to draw the Plains and instantly slam a Seasoned Dungeoneer. Jesse going to let it resolve. In comes Initiative. Jacob going to search his library for another basic. Going to be a basic Plains. Pass the turn to Jesse. Jesse gonna draw. She finds either the Volcanic Island or the Wasteland, but she does have 2 sources of mana. Down comes a Murktide Regent. This is very well timed, especially after Jacob dedicated and committed to Solitude to the DRC. So exiling all of the instants and sorceries. So Meltdown, Daze, Brainstorm, Lightning Bolt. This is a full 8/8 Murktide Regent. Alright, Jacob not going to be able to outrace a Murktide Regent with just the Seasoned Dungeoneer. So now these Chalices are kind of working against him a little bit here because he cannot cast these Swords to Plowshares. Alright, Jacob's going to scry with Undercity, sees Plateau and Caves of Chaos Adventurer. It's starting to get pretty dangerous using this Ancient Tomb, especially now that there's the 8/8 Murktide. And he's only at 11 points of health to Jesse's 23. Going to bottom both. Draws for the turn. It is a 4th Aerlingus. So we can make 1, 2, 3 tokens. But still, going to be really hard to race this Murktide region, especially if you're going to use 2 life to put 2 tokens in. So he's gonna, if Jesse has nothing else, Murktide Regent is gonna very nicely clean up this game here. But Jacob going to cast the 4th Aerlingus for the max amount, gonna bring in 3 soldier tokens to 2 haste tramplers, and whenever he deals combat damage this turn, he does get Monarch. So Seasoned Engineer gonna attack trigger, gonna explore, adds Cavern of Souls to the hand. Murktide Regent will most likely just block one of these 2/2 human soldiers, or human knights, or whatever they are. She is going to take 7. Goes down to 16. Jacob at 9. Jacob is going to get Monarch, go to the end step trigger, and draws for his turn. Go to pass to Jesse. Jesse gonna untap. Draws for her turn. What does she find? That is a Ponder. Go to play Wasteland. And swing in for 8. Brings Jacob down to 1. Gonna trigger Initiative. And Monarch. So now Jesse does have Initiative and the Monarch. She is going to just shuffle her library because Temur does not play any basic lands. Alright, here's a Meltdown for 2. Going to resolve and get rid of both Chalice of the Voids. Going to the end step, Jesse going to draw a card, hoping it was a Lightning Bolt. Doesn't look like it was. Jacob going to draw for his turn, finds a Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So Jesse found a Polluted Delta off of the Monarch trigger. Jacob goes straight into combat. Ooh, Jesse pulls out Unholy Heat against the Seasoned Engineer. Does have Delirium, so it is going to be 6 points of damage. Going to kill the Seasoned Engineer. So this leaves Jacob with substantially less power on the board. Only 4 points brings Jesse down to 12. He does get Initiative and Monarch again, but he did take the second path of Undercity and only makes a treasure token. This does free up the Swords to Plowshares on the Murktide Regent though. So Jesse just needs to deploy this Brazen Borrower safely and just try to get one more attack in. I guess she could also use the Ponder to try to dig for like a Lightning Bolt, but one Lightning Bolt has already been used. And she doesn't have a DRC to kind of churn through her deck. So Brazen Borrower, like Petty Theft into Brazen Borrower might be the play. She could even just not use Petty Theft and just try to hardcast a Brazen Borrower, but if she does, then a second Swords to Plowshare will just take care of all of that very neatly. So getting rid of the token while like on the way in is not a terrible idea. He's just going to pass back. Jesse going to draw for her turn. Finds a Volcanic Island off of the top. Gonna go to combat, swing with the Murktide Regent. There's a Swords to Plowshares from Jacob. Going to exile it. Jesse going to go straight to 20. All right, Jesse going to the second main phase. Taps for 1. Nope. Just taps for 1, going to Ponder. Alright, does she find the kill? Jacob's only at 1. All she needs to find is a lightning. I think that's a lightning bolt. There it is. And yes, right off the top, the middle card. Alright. So that is Jesse taking it over Jacob in round number 2 for the Legacy of the North Invitational. Thank you guys for joining me, and I'm sorry for all of the technical difficulties on this one, but hopefully you'll join me on the next round, and hopefully there are no hiccups there. See you next time.